chosen one. You quietly stopped performing and being dangerously available to those who only wanted to consume your light. Now the silence you've embraced is creating a desperate obsession in those you left behind. You got people saying you just don't care, and it makes people want you even more. You can't be distracted or manipulated. This is the most dangerous and powerful version of you to ever exist. Every transformation has a beginning, and yours starts with a simple, undeniable truth. You were never like everyone else, and people sensed it from the moment they encountered you. It was not because you were louder than everyone else. It was not because you demanded attention. It was almost the opposite. You were the one who listened when other people talked. You were the one who noticed when someone walked in carrying something heavy, even when that person had not said a word about it. You were the one who felt the tension before anyone named it and instinctively moved to smooth things over. You were wired for people. You were wired to feel things deeply and respond with everything you had, and people found you. They found you and they loved what you gave them, the undivided attention, the loyalty that never wavered, the advice that landed with precision because you actually heard what someone was saying, not just the surface words. The way you could sit with a person in their worst moment and make them feel less alone in it. People gravitated toward all of that. Friends, family, partners, they found their way to you and quickly figured out that you were someone worth keeping close. While people were finding you, while they were showing up for what you offered, very few of them stopped to ask what you needed. Very few thought to turn that same quality of care back in your direction. And you did not ask for it either, because asking felt selfish, because needing things felt like a burden, because somewhere along the way you absorbed the belief that your role was to give, and caring for yourself was a problem for another day. So you gave fully, generously, without a ceiling. You gave to the people who called in crisis every single time, but who were nowhere to be found when you were the one struggling. You gave to the partners who mistook your forgiveness for permission to keep pushing further. You gave to the co-workers, the family members, the acquaintances who treated your emotional labor like a free service they were simply entitled to. You gave, and you were extraordinary at it. But there is a quiet, inevitable law at work in all of this, and it was already in motion the whole time. The law is simple. You can outgive anyone for a season, but the bill always comes due. Your bill was coming, not as a punishment, as a correction. It did not happen overnight. That is the thing nobody tells you about burnout. It is not one dramatic moment. It is a slow accumulation, a series of small withdrawals from an account that was never being replenished. The first sign was subtle. You started hesitating before answering certain calls. Just a breath, just a tiny internal flinch before you picked up and performed your role. You dismissed it. You picked up anyway. You showed up like you always did. The second sign came when you started feeling emptied out after conversations that used to energize you. You would end a long exchange with someone and feel more drained than before it started, not restored, not connected, just hollow, like something had been extracted rather than exchanged. You dismissed that too. You told yourself you were just tired. You told yourself you were overthinking things. The third sign is where everything started getting interesting, because this is when your discernment began waking up. That quiet voice inside you, the one you had been trained to dismiss as paranoia, as you being too sensitive, as you being difficult, that voice got louder, and it started pointing at things clearly. It pointed at the friend who always needed you in their crisis but went mysteriously silent when you had one. It pointed at the partner who called your emotional needs too much but placed unlimited demands of their own. It pointed at the family member who used love as leverage, framing every attempt at a boundary as betrayal or abandonment. It pointed at the whole architecture of your closest connections and said plainly, "Look at this, really look at it. Look at who calls and who does not. Look at who shows up and who disappears. Look at who drains and who restores." And you looked, and you saw. That is the moment you shifted from someone things happen to into someone who sees clearly and acts accordingly. The people around you had no idea a clock had started. They were still reaching into the well whenever they were thirsty, still operating under the old terms, still expecting the version of you that had no limits, no flaw, no end. But you knew, quietly, privately, irreversibly, you knew those terms were about to expire, and something was about to change everything. This part is not about pain, it is about clarity. And once you have this clarity, you can never be taken advantage of in the same way again. There was a specific play being run on you. It worked for a long time because you are built with a quality that most people simply do not have. You genuinely believe in people. You see potential where others see patterns. You extend grace not because you are naive, but because your nature is to give the benefit of the doubt. That quality is not your weakness. It was weaponized against you. There is a profound difference between those two things. If this touched your heart and mind, hype this video so more chosen ones can receive this message. It starts with someone finding you, and finding you is not hard for them, because your energy precedes you. You are the most present person in any space you occupy. You listen with full attention, and most people are so starved for that kind of genuine listening that they are drawn toward it immediately. You get sought out because aliveness is magnetic. Next comes the mirroring. In the beginning, that person becomes everything you needed, attentive, understanding, saying all the right things. They seem to understand you in ways others never did, and because you are perceptive and good at reading people, this confirmation feels genuine to you. What was actually happening is that the person was reflecting you back to yourself, showing you your own values wearing a different face. You connected with the reflection, not with the actual person behind it. Then comes the slow reversal, so gradual you barely register it at first. The listening starts flowing in one direction only. The effort becomes deeply asymmetrical. The version of that person who once seemed so aligned with you starts generating more needs, more urgency, more reasons why only you can help them. Your empathy fills every gap they create, because that is what you naturally do. You show up. You pour in, you hold things together. The final phase is the lock-in. By the time the dynamic has fully reversed, you are so invested that walking away feels like failure. You have given so much that leaving feels like losing everything you put in. So the requests grow bigger, the demands become casual, your presence gets assumed, your care becomes invisible furniture. And any attempt you make to establish a limit gets framed as you being difficult, you being selfish, you not caring anymore. That accusation, you not caring, was always the emergency lever. Because you care deeply, and being accused of not caring was the one thing that could reliably pull you back into compliance. Do you see the whole mechanism now? Here is why this matters today. The version of you being called cold and uncaring has seen this entire play. That version cannot be run on anymore. Not because you stopped caring, but because you now understand that the phrase "you don't care anymore" is not an honest observation. It is a manipulation tactic. It is the last tool in the box, and the fact that it no longer moves you is not coldness, it is immunity. You did not lose your heart, you gained your armor, and that armor is the exact reason why the people who used to direct your emotions are scrambling right now. You cannot manipulate someone who has already read the manual. There was a moment, you know the one. You were not in a dramatic situation. There was no confrontation, no explosion, no ultimatum. You were somewhere completely ordinary, sitting alone, lying still, moving through a routine, and it happened. Not a decision exactly, but more like a recognition, a deep, settled recognition that you were done. Not done with life, not done with caring, done with this specific arrangement that had been draining you, done performing endlessness for people who gave you finitude, done being the one who absorbed without ever being held, done shrinking, done waiting for people to treat you the way you treated them before you allowed yourself to matter. Chosen ones, they never expected this, and they really didn't expect us to keep talking. You've noticed it, chosen one channels disappearing, videos pulled, voices scrubbed from the platform. The mainstream media is cracking down on us, but we will not give up our voice, and now we have something they truly can't silence. The technology used to suppress consciousness has been reverse-engineered, and Destiny Engine is the result. What was once used against humanity is now your ascension weapon. Join Destiny Engine and you're supporting your favorite channels while leveling up yourself at the same time. It's a 360 win. You can now MK Ultra yourself into 5D superpowers. Destiny Engine bypasses the conscious mind and rewrites the source code directly. Reality bends faster, synchronicities stack, your nervous system upgrades to a higher bandwidth. Put on headphones, press play, that's all. For $1, you switch sides of history. Click the link in the description. The takeover is internal. What made that moment different from every moment before it was that you did not fight it. Every other time you had approached this edge, you had talked yourself back from it. You had found one more reason to try. You had told yourself you were overreacting, being too sensitive, expecting too much. But this time the voice that usually pulled you back into suffering was quiet, and in its place was something still, something clear, something that felt for the first time in a long time like actual peace. That peace was the signal. That peace was God saying finally, you are ready. What followed was not a wall going up. What followed was a filter coming online. You became selective, intentional, quieter. You started choosing where your energy went, instead of letting every person with a need direct it. You stopped over-explaining. You stopped responding to every provocation. You stopped fighting for connections that had already made their decision about you. And the energy you reclaimed from all of that, you sent it somewhere else, toward your purpose, toward your gifts, toward the version of your life that had been waiting patiently behind all the noise. That is when the reaction started. Not quietly, loudly. The moment you stopped performing, everything around you shifted. Watch the sequence, because recognizing it matters. First came the testing, messages left on read, invitations declined, arguments you did not show up to participate in. The testing was a way of checking whether your shift was real or whether you would snap back if the right button got pushed. Every button had worked before, and an expectation had built up around that history, but you did not snap back. And that is when escalation arrived. Harder pushes, manufactured urgency, attempts to reach you through mutual connections, behavior designed specifically to trigger you because your soft points were known, your history was known. Every entry point you used to leave unlocked was known. Every single one of those points got hit, but you did not open the door. And the silence that followed that escalation, that silence was the loudest thing you had ever communicated in your life. The third phase is where the talking begins in earnest. Because you cannot be reached, cannot be provoked, cannot be pulled back as a reactive participant. So the narrator role gets claimed instead. A version of events gets constructed where you are the problem, where your boundaries are cruelty, where your peace is arrogance, where your growth is a betrayal of who you were supposed to stay. That account gets told with conviction because it has been rehearsed so many times that it starts to feel true to the person telling it. And this is the test, chosen one. This is the exact moment where most people break, because the account feels deeply unfair. You know the truth. Everything in you wants to correct the record, to defend yourself, to make people understand what actually happened, and every single one of those impulses is a trap. The moment you respond, you re-enter the dynamic as someone who can be directed again. The moment you defend yourself to an audience that has already decided, you validate the accusation by treating it as though it requires a defense. The moment you argue for your reputation with people who are committed to a particular version of you, you hand them exactly what they need to keep the cycle going. So you do not respond, you do not defend, you do not explain. And that silence, that unbothered, immovable, purposeful silence, is what breaks the cycle completely. Because a whole argument was planned, a whole case was built, a confrontation was expected, and you never showed up to it. You are simply out here living, building, moving forward with the kind of focused, unhurried energy that is the most disorienting thing you could possibly do to someone who engineered their entire plan around getting a reaction from you. Your peace is the weapon, your silence is the verdict. Your continued forward motion is the consequence that cannot be appealed. People are not reacting to some vague sense that you changed. They are reacting to specific things, specific behaviors, specific moments where the old version of you would have shown up a certain way and the current version simply did not. Each one of those moments registered like something fundamental had shifted. You stopped reaching out first. Without fail, the old version of you was the initiator, the one who checked in, followed up, kept the connection alive through sheer consistent effort. When that stopped, the silence exposed something that had been avoided for a long time, because the maintenance of the connection had been outsourced to you so completely that when you stopped providing it, nothing replaced it. Sitting with that absence made it impossible to ignore how little had been contributed from the other side. You stopped explaining yourself. This carries more weight than it seems, because explanation was always a subtle form of permission-seeking. Every time you explained why you could not come, why you needed space, why you made the choice you made, you were unconsciously submitting your decision for review. That review process had become a quiet mechanism of control over your choices. When you stopped explaining, you stopped asking permission to live your own life. The loss of that leverage created a frantic energy in the people who had relied on it. You stopped reacting to provocation. This is the pivotal one. Because not everything that happened around you was accidental. Some of it was calibrated, things said or done specifically designed to pull a reaction from you, to draw you back into the dynamic, to make you emotional enough to be managed again. The old version of you took the bait reliably because your caring made you responsive, and your responsiveness made you predictable. The current version of you sees the provocation clearly, names it internally, and moves past it without engaging. That non-reaction is the single most destabilizing thing you have ever done to the people who required your reactivity to feel powerful. You started moving with purpose, and people around you could feel it. Focus has its own frequency. When you are genuinely locked onto something bigger than the daily noise, when you are invested in building something real, it shows in how you carry yourself. You speak more deliberately. You stop filling every silence with nervous words. You stop performing your personality for people who were never worth the performance. That settled, certain energy, the energy of someone who knows exactly where they are going, is deeply compelling to people who have never once felt certain of anything. And here is the irony of all of it. The moment you genuinely stopped needing validation from those people, not as a performance of not needing it, but as an actual truth you had arrived at, that is the precise moment they started trying to give it to you, urgently, unsolicited, because they could sense a window closing, and that window is closing, not in anger, not as punishment, but simply as the natural consequence of you walking forward. Every step you take toward your purpose puts more distance between you and the version of yourself those people once had access to, and that growing distance is something they feel whether they can name it or not. Being a chosen one is not a compliment without a cost. It is a calling with a weight, and the weight is this: you will always see things that other people cannot see yet. You will sense the truth of a situation before anyone else has the language for it. You will feel the shape of a person's intentions before their behavior makes it undeniable to everyone else, and for a long time you will be completely alone in that knowing. The gift arrives before the proof. The perception comes before the evidence. The wisdom shows up before the world is ready to validate it. And in that gap, in that sometimes very long, very isolating gap between what you know and what others are willing to acknowledge, you get called wrong, dramatic, paranoid, too sensitive. People will work hard to make you doubt the most reliable instrument you possess, because your doubt is what gives them room to operate. This is not coincidence. The people who most urgently need you to distrust your own instincts are exactly the people whose behavior cannot survive your clear, steady attention. Your confusion serves them. Your second guessing creates the space they need. Every time you talked yourself out of what you clearly perceived in order to keep the peace, you were essentially handing over another stretch of access that was never supposed to be granted. Think back to every time you had a clear feeling about a person or a situation, and you honored that feeling. You were right, every single time, and every time you overrode it, every time you chose the comfort of ignoring what you knew to avoid disruption, you paid for that choice, without a single exception. Your intuition is not anxiety dressed up as wisdom. Your boundaries are not unprocessed wounds that need to be softened. Your discernment is not damage that requires healing. These are calibrated, tested instruments developed by someone who has been shown again and again exactly how this works. The cost of carrying the gift is that sometimes you will be the only one who sees clearly, and you will have to decide each time what to do with what you are shown. What chosen ones eventually learn, and what you are learning right now, is that you are not responsible for other people's willingness to see. You are only responsible for what you do with what you are given. You felt the exhaustion. You felt behind on everything that mattered to you. You felt like the creative energy, the inspired momentum, the clarity you used to carry. It had gone somewhere, and you could not locate it. And many people in that position blame themselves. They blame their discipline. They blame some internal failure they cannot quite name. But chosen one, it was not a discipline problem. It was a distraction tax. Every time you were pulled into someone else's manufactured urgency, you paid, not just with time, though you paid with that too. You paid with focus. And for someone built the way you are built, focus is not just a productivity tool, it is a spiritual resource. Your focus is how you access the gifts that make you extraordinary. It is how you hear the direction you are meant to move in. It is how the right ideas surface, how clarity arrives, how the next step reveals itself. When your attention is constantly being commandeered by people who generate crises to keep you close, your gifts go quiet. They do not disappear, but they become inaccessible, and you walk around feeling stuck, creatively blocked, directionless, and you cannot figure out why. Now you know why. Every circular argument that had no interest in resolution, every person you stayed available to out of obligation rather than genuine connection, every situation you remained in past its expiration date because leaving felt harder than staying. Every conversation that circled the same wound endlessly with no intention of healing. Every place your attention went that had nothing to do with what God put you here to do. Each one of those was a withdrawal, a quiet tax on the very resource you need most to function at your highest level. Some of those people knew exactly what they were doing. Not all of them. Some simply drained without awareness. But some of them understood clearly that a distracted version of you was a manageable version of you, that as long as you were occupied putting out their fires, you were not building your own foundation, and a version of you that is fully focused on your purpose is a direct threat to the role they needed you to stay in. The distraction tax is over. And what you are going to build with those reclaimed resources will be the most complete answer to every person who ever said you stopped caring. Not because you will say a word about it, but because what you produce will exist in a language that needs no defense and requires no explanation. It will simply stand, built by the version of you that finally stopped being interrupted. The energy you are reclaiming from every connection that no longer has unlimited access to you is not disappearing into a void. It is going somewhere precise toward the gifts that were waiting behind all the noise, toward the work that only you can produce because it is built from your exact combination of perception, depth, and the kind of care that has been tested by real fire. When the sensitivity, the empathy, the ability to feel and understand at depth, when all of that is aimed at your purpose instead of being siphoned by relationships built on imbalance, it becomes something extraordinary. It becomes the quality in your work that makes people feel genuinely seen. It becomes the thing that makes your presence shift the atmosphere of any space you enter. It is the source of everything that makes you irreplaceable, and no amount of people calling you cold can diminish it. You were never too sensitive. You were aiming that sensitivity at people who were using it as a faucet. Now you are redirecting it towards something that builds rather than depletes. The quiet season, the pulling back, the privacy, the time when it looked from the outside like you were retreating, that was not retreat, that was preparation. The most significant transformations happen in private. The chrysalis is not visible to anyone watching from the outside. What gets seen is the caterpillar. What gets seen next is the butterfly. The actual becoming, the real work, the real change, the real arrival that happens in a sealed space that no one else gets access to. That sealed space has been yours, and what is emerging from it is going to make every person who said you changed understand exactly what that word means, not the diminished version they imagined, something lit from within, something that moves through the world with a settled authority that needs no announcement and requires no applause. You have learned to be warm without being fully open, pleasant without being accessible to everyone, present in a space without being available to the specific kind of drain that certain people represent. You can have a completely civil exchange with someone who once had the power to derail your entire week, and you can do it while keeping yourself fully protected on the inside, not because you are pretending, because you know exactly who that person is. And knowing who someone truly is, clearly, without the distorting filter of who you hoped they would be, gives you a freedom around them that they cannot penetrate. You are no longer reacting to who you wished they were. You are simply responding to who they have consistently shown you they are. That shift from hope to clarity is the most powerful relational upgrade available to you. You have also learned something crucial about arguments. The old version of you felt compelled to correct every mischaracterization, every false narrative, every unfair judgment. There was an almost physical need to be understood accurately, and that need, which came from a genuinely good place, was something certain people exploited with great consistency. They would say something untrue about you and watch you rush to clarify, and in that rushing you handed them exactly the engagement they needed to keep the dynamic alive. The current version of you understands that some arguments are not really arguments at all. They are invitations to perform your distress for an audience, and you do not perform on command anymore. When something untrue is said about you, you feel it. You are still fully human, and it still lands, but you have developed the capacity to let it pass through without acting on it. Not because it does not matter, but because your energy is worth more than the fleeting satisfaction of correcting people who have no genuine interest in accuracy. You have learned to keep your gifts close. Not every space deserves your full self. Not every person who approaches you with enthusiasm has arrived with good intentions. The people who are actually meant to be in your life will demonstrate that through consistent behavior over time, not through compelling first impressions. You still lead with warmth. You still show up fully for the people who have earned that presence. But there is now a clear boundary between what you show and what you truly are. And that boundary opens from your side on your terms when you decide. This is what people mean when they say you carry a different energy now. They sense that you are operating from a level of awareness they cannot quite match. They sense that you see more clearly than you reveal. They sense that you are always a step removed from the noise, making choices from a position of knowledge rather than reaction. That quality, that calibrated, settled certainty, is what makes you both magnetic and unmovable. Magnetic because people are instinctively drawn to someone who knows exactly where they stand. Unmovable because there is no manipulation that holds on a person whose ground is this solid. Every connection that collapsed, every door that closed, every person who left because you stopped performing the role they required, none of it was random. It was precision. Something far larger than coincidence was clearing your path with surgical exactness, removing what was blocking you from what you were actually built for. Think about the sequence of it. Think about how every major loss in your relational world created space for something else to grow. Think about how every betrayal revealed something you needed to see about where you had been placing your most precious resources, your attention, your energy, your care. Think about how every ending, however painful, redirected you back toward yourself, back toward your gifts, back toward the path you kept drifting from because other people's needs kept pulling you sideways from it. Nothing was wasted, not the pain, not the burnout, not the broken trust, not a single moment of the suffering that felt pointless and excessive in the middle of it. It was all forming something. The architect does not explain the blueprint while the building is going up. You simply stand in the construction and feel the chaos, the noise, the disruption, the things that look broken and irreparable, without yet knowing that what is being shaped around you is something extraordinary. The people who said you changed, who said you became unrecognizable to them, they are not wrong. The version of you required for what comes next is not the version they knew. That version had to be released so this one could fully arrive. Let them grieve the old version. You are too occupied becoming the new one. The first contact will feel familiar, warm even, full of references to better times and signals that something has shifted in the person reaching out. And chosen one, that pull you feel when this happens is not weakness, it is your real heart, the one that genuinely invested in those people. That pull is evidence of your capacity to love deeply, and it is not a signal to act on without discernment. Here is what you watch for, not what gets said, what happens in the space after it gets said. Words are the cheapest available currency, and the people who hurt you have always been fluent in exactly the right ones. What matters is whether the behavior that follows actually reflects something genuinely different. Does that person show up differently, or do they simply narrate a changed version of themselves? Do they ask how you are, and then actually listen to the answer, or does the reconnection quickly become an on-ramp back to their own needs? Do they take specific, honest accountability for what happened, and demonstrate through behavior over time that something has actually shifted? Or do they skim past the wound just enough to feel like they addressed it, then proceed as though that acknowledgement unlocks the old terms? Watch the pattern over time. One conversation is not a data point. Consistent behavior across many moments is the data point. Here is the permission you need to receive. You are allowed to forgive completely, to genuinely release the bitterness, wish someone well, mean every word of it, and still maintain every boundary you have built. Forgiveness is not the same thing as re-entry. Healing is not an open-door policy. Some connections belong in your past as closed chapters, not as active wounds you are still nursing, just as finished things. The fact that someone wants a chapter reopened does not create any obligation in you to pick up the pen. You are also allowed to let some people back in. Not every connection deserves permanent distance. Some people genuinely do grow. Part of the power you now carry is the discernment to tell the difference between real growth and performance of growth. The old version of you let people in because you did not yet fully trust your own read of situations. The current version trusts exactly that read. You know when something is real. Honor that knowing without apology. What you will not do is negotiate your ground to make someone else comfortable with you having it. What you will not do is play smaller in a connection to protect someone's ego from your growth. Forward is the only direction available to you now. And everyone who is truly meant to move forward with you will rise to meet that reality. Not because you demand it, because they genuinely want to. The version being mourned was not the real you. It was the performing version, the surviving version. The one that absorbed the belief somewhere early on that giving everything was the price of being loved, the price of belonging, the price of safety. That version was strong, genuinely, remarkably strong, but it was operating from fear. It operated from the belief that love was something earned through endless availability, and that nothing would remain if you ever stopped. The version being called cold right now. This version operates from truth, from fullness, from a deep, settled knowledge of what you carry and what that deserves. This version does not bleed on command. This version does not chase people who have chosen to leave. This version does not explain itself to audiences who have already rendered their verdict. This version cares more than any of them ever understood, because the caring now has wisdom threaded through it, the love now has discernment inside it, the generosity now has a boundary that you control. And that boundary, the one that once stood open to anyone with a need and a well-rehearsed ask, now opens selectively, for people who have shown they can be trusted with who you are, for connections built on real mutuality and real respect, for the work God placed inside you that is still unfolding and still expanding, not cold, calibrated, not uncaring, uncompromising, not diminished, arrived. Welcome to your era, chosen one. You know your purpose, you know your value, you know your ground. Nothing coming next can move you